right, we got a great topic today. So the question is Stephen A. Smith actually declaring war on ESPN? Enough from me. Let's hear what Stephen A. has to say.
Let me address something to some of the haters out there about me. Y'all can kiss my ass. Twice. I'm talking directly to the people in the industry who sat up there and said, why isn't Stephen A. gone? Ladies and gentlemen, we got a few people at ESPN getting paid more than me. They don't have the number one show. They don't have the top ratings. They don't generate more revenue. How come y'all didn't bring their names up? And by the way, none of them are black. How come you didn't bring their names up? I wonder why. I'm talking to those folks, the critics in the media, or the wannabe medias with the blogosphere and the websites that never went through the terrain of being official members of the fourth estate. I'm talking about them. How come y'all didn't bring them up? But me, who's been number one, who's got the top rated show, who by the way is an executive producer on that top rated show, my name comes up.
So clearly Stephen A. Smith is not happy about all those people inside and outside of both the legitimate media and then, of course, people with vlogs, blogs, and websites, as he pointed out. Look, things are definitely shifting and changing, as we all know, in the sports media landscape. Stephen A. Smith, I don't think, is going to be ousted at ESPN anytime soon. That is, unless he wants to be ousted by ESPN. I mean, when you think about it, what else does ESPN have? Look, I love SVP, but beyond that and Stephen A. Smith, what else is there on ESPN today? Now, we know that the knight in shining armor, one Pat McAfee, is going to be joining ESPN. And I can confidently tell you that if he gets the ratings that Stephen A. Smith and First Take get, the folks over at ESPN will probably be pretty happy. Now, Stephen A. talked about how his show is the number one rated show, and he's talking about the number one rated sports show on television and on cable television. Let's go ahead and pull up the stats for ESPN from the month of June. This is June 2023. And First Take actually came in 14th. Look, the College World Series was number one. Look at how well F1 Cup does. Look, clearly, if you read the tea leaves here, it's live programming that actually works on ESPN. And of course, First Take is the show of its kind that also works for ESPN. There were 256 shows that got ratings in the month of June. A First Take at ESPN was 14th out of those 256 shows. The show at First Take actually historically does really well during the National Football League season and will peak generally in December, with its ratings shooting all the way up to close to 1 million viewers a day. So for the month of June, for it to be at 400,000 is actually above where it was the previous year. Look, First Take is a good show. Personally, look, I really like the First Things First show on FS1 with Nick Wright and Chris Broussard and Kevin Wild. It's a good kind of mixture of humor as well as actual sports content and actual sports debate that sort of matters sometimes. That being said, what should the folks over at ESPN actually be doing? Now, when Pat McAfee joins, if he has, 400,000 viewers a day on average during the month of June, I think the folks over at ESPN would be very happy with that. During the football season, which clearly is probably the sweet spot for these kinds of shows, including the Pat McAfee show, and outside of Aaron Rodgers Tuesdays, if he can hold anything between 700,000 and 1 million viewers, it will have been worth the investment that ESPN made. Now, if ESPN really wants to invest in the right kinds of shows, then they should be investing in more shows like Pat McAfee today, because that is, quite frankly, where the sports media landscape has gone. The guys over at AM Hoops do an absolutely fantastic job. The Flight Mike does an absolutely fantastic job. Sporting Logical is another good show. Look, there's a ton of really good shows out there. As for Stephen A. Smith and the position that he has taken, I'm not really surprised that he came out and said what he said. I'm not really surprised that Stephen A. Smith has been doing what he's been doing. His current contract, allegedly, is worth $8 million a year for being on the air. He gets another $4 million in a contract to produce shows on ESPN. So essentially, it's a $12 million deal. And Stephen A. Smith is all over the place. He's also diversified himself quite a lot over the years. Now, he's got his No Mercy podcast, which we showed a clip of earlier. That clip is on his No Mercy podcast, which is completely separate from ESPN. Stephen A. Smith on record has said that he wants to become an actor. He wants to produce television shows. He wants to produce films. He recently released a book. He did a whole book tour. Stephen A. Smith goes on political shows. All of that is part of his spiel. Stephen A. Smith has even said that he would love to replace Jimmy Kimmel when the time comes. Look, Stephen A. Smith is clearly all about making money, and he has set himself up in a position. While there were a lot of changes made at ESPN, and there's also a ton of false information floating around as if ESPN itself lost $5.5 billion. Period One report, that's what it said. It's just not possible. As for Disney losing a lot of money on its streaming properties, well then, that might be something that is more legitimate, but to actually say that it was ESPN itself, the worldwide leader in sports, which does so well with live broadcasting, could lose $5.5 billion in a single year, seems absolutely ridiculous. Now, did they need to clean house? Was it time to make a shift from one direction to another? As hard as it is to make these kinds of business decisions, the reality is that they probably did need to make some rather significant changes. Not because of the performance of the people on and off the air, but simply because of the shifting landscape. All right, thanks so much for tuning in. Totally forgot to say this, but hey, welcome to the House of Take Pods. If you haven't had a chance to subscribe yet, please go ahead and subscribe to the show for the House of Take Pod. I'm Dave DeBaugh, wishing you all a tremendous rest of your sports viewing day.